Okay, ladies and gentlemen, so this is chapter 10, moving on to part 2. Last video got us to the Compromise of 1850, so we'll continue now with Uncle Tom's Cabin. Uncle Tom's Cabin was a novel written by Harriet Beecher Stowe. It was published in 1852. Harriet Beecher Stowe was an abolitionist. She was from a Puritan family in the North. And Uncle Tom's Cabin is a novel that she published. It is fictional. It is not about an actual family, but it is about slaves in the South, particularly the main character whose name is Tom, and it kind of um, documents his life and his family's life throughout various plantations in the South. And Uncle Tom's Cabin paints a very cool picture of slavery. And so this book becomes very, very popular in the North. It's a bestseller, and people who read it start to think things that maybe they didn't know about slavery before. They're exposed to all of the evils that are associated with slavery. The South, on the other hand, is very offended by this book. They feel like Harriet Beecher Stowe has over-exaggerated in many cases, and is showing a false perception of what slavery is really like. And so, much like everything else going on in this time, it makes the tensions between the North and the South even greater. The Fugitive Slave Act, which was a part of the Compromise of 1850, one of the concessions to the South after California is made a free state. The Fugitive Slave Act says that any slaves who have escaped to the North, um, other people in the North, now white people, are legally obligated to help return them to the South, even if they're in the North or even if they have been born there. They really don't have the same kind of freedom that they had before. It's as easy for a Southern slave owner to go up north and simply point out a black person and say that they used to be a slave, then there would be a trial and they would most likely be sent back to the South. In most cases, the federal commissioners that oversaw these trials, they receive $10 if they return the slave to the South, only $5 if they let them stay in the North. So in most cases, they would decide to send them back to the South. Northerners, on the other hand, even if they were abolitionists, even if they were against slavery in the South, they could be fined or could be jailed for refusing to help catch a runaway slave. So Northern resistance is becoming quite common. A lot of people who really didn't have much to say about the slavery issue before in the North, they see this as an invasion of their rights, of their privacy, of what they believe and what they want to do, when they are quite frustrated. Okay, the Underground Railroad is not actually a railroad. Most of you probably know that. The Underground Railroad is a series of trails and secret paths leading from the south to the north, a system for slaves to run away from the south into freedom in the north. Most of the time they would travel at night so that they could be less easily seen and caught. They would often have what we call conductors, which may have been an abolitionist, a white person that's helping them along the way, or even slaves that have escaped before them, the most popular being Harriet Tubman. Harriet Tubman escaped from the north to the south, and throughout her lifetime she made many, many journeys back to the south through the Underground Railroad to help others reach freedom in the north as well, risking her own life and her own safety. So along the Underground Railroad, we would have conductors. There would be safe houses, people who would let slaves stay there for the day to hide out. There would often be slaveholders would often hire people to go and search for their runaway slaves, sniffing out with dogs, etc. So it was a very dangerous trip for runaway slaves, but many of them did make it to the north through the Underground Railroad. The Transcontinental Railroad, on the other hand, is an actual railroad. Okay? In the mid-1800s, we need something to connect the west coast, which is growing now. We've got all this new land from Mexico that we are settling and using. We need to find a better way to connect it to the rest of the country. Make it easier for people to travel out there, make it easier to transport goods that we are buying and selling to the west from the east, etc. Okay, so the problem now is we can't decide if we are going to start the railroad in the south or in the north. Okay, Jefferson Davis, okay, this name you will hear again later on. Jefferson Davis is a Southerner senator, and he proposes that the railroad be built starting in New Orleans in Louisiana and travel through the Southwest. He wanted to make sure that the Southerners were the ones who were able to build the railroad. It provided work to them, and landowners got that money from selling certain parts of their land to the railroad to build through it. The problem is that building through the Southwest would create some problems. There's a lot of mountainous regions, desert areas that are very difficult to build a railroad through. Okay, so he organizes what we call the Gadsden Purchase. Okay, he buys parts of Arizona, what is now Arizona, southern New Mexico, from Mexico for about $10 million, land that would be more flat and easier to build a railroad through. Stephen Douglas, a senator from Illinois, he and the Northerners want the railroad to start not in New Orleans, but in Chicago, in Illinois, and go through the area west of Missouri, what is now Nebraska and Kansas, but was unorganized territory at the time. So the problem there is if we want to build a railroad through Nebraska, it has to be organized into a territory first. And the problem with organizing anything into a territory is, are we going to allow slavery there or not, which is our enduring problem of this era. Okay, so that brings us to the Kansas-Nebraska Act. So if we go back, some of you will remember the Missouri Compromise from 1820. So what happened when Missouri became a state? Missouri became a slave state. In return for Missouri becoming a slave state, Maine was admitted as a free state, so that we could keep an even keel in Congress as far as representatives and senators go from slave and free states. And along with that, there is a new dividing line throughout the country, going from the southern border of Missouri all the way west. And the Missouri Compromise decided that anything north of this southern Missouri border, excluding the new state of Missouri, would become a free territory when they decided to organize and become a territory or a state. So that would include what we now have as Nebraska and Kansas, the area that we're arguing about whether or not it should become a slave or a free state. So Stephen Douglas proposes that the territory west of Missouri, Kansas and Nebraska, the blue, we should just accommodate the South and make it one free territory and one slave territory to accommodate both the North and the South, so that we can just get over this problem. Okay, so we know it's both above the Missouri Compromise line. To do so would be breaking the Missouri Compromise, and that's exactly what we do. Okay? In 1854, the Kansas-Nebraska Act is passed, effectively overturning the Missouri Compromise. We do not decide to have one slave and one free state, but that we will have popular sovereignty there, which, if you remember, means that the people in those states will be able to vote on whether or not they want to allow slavery. Okay, so possible outcomes, you could probably assume, again, like everything in this era, it's going to increase tensions. Okay? The North is not happy about the Missouri Compromise being broken. We already decided that those were going to be free territories, and now they're not. And the South is upset because they wanted to be able to claim either Kansas or Nebraska as a slave state, and now we have the issue of now we're going to have to vote on it, so there's a chance that that might not happen. Which brings us to Bleeding Kansas. Okay, so if any of you have ever worried about or ever wondered where the rivalry between Missouri and Kansas comes from, here it is. Okay, so Kansas is obviously being disputed right now. It's going to be a slave territory or a free. Okay, so we have people from both slave holders and both people who are against the expansion of slavery. We've already decided that it's going to be decided by popular sovereignty, people voting. So everybody is moving to Kansas. Slaveholders and anti-slavery forces both moving to Kansas so they could try to sway the vote on whether it's going to become a slave state or a free state. Slaveholders specifically from Missouri moving across the border into Kansas, as well as anti-slavery people from the North, from Indiana, Massachusetts, Pennsylvania, wherever, moving into Kansas as well. The border ruffians are what we call the Missourians, the slave holders that move across the border to Kansas to vote illegally, trying to sway the vote to become a slave state. Okay, the border ruffians and the pro-slavery forces draft their own constitution in Topeka. The anti-slavery forces, of course, are not very happy about it. All of this arguing is going on in Kansas. At the same time, the border ruffians, as we call them, cross over into Kansas in the city of Lawrence, which is, some of you may know, where the University of Kansas is now, and attack the city, burn it to the ground, and kill several people in the process. So Lawrence is burned down by pro-slavery forces, including Jesse James, you may know, as one of the border ruffians. In return, John Brown, who is an anti-slavery enthusiast, he, along with a couple of his sons and a couple of his followers, attack a family of slave owners in another town, Pottawatomie Creek, which is known as the Pottawatomie Massacre, brutally killing 5 slaveholders there. So Kansas is kind of the beginning, a lot of people assume, of the Civil War, where the first fighting really begins in Kansas.